Welcome to Inclusion Matters, a podcast about children's development from the Center for Inclusive Childcare. Welcome to Inclusion Matters, a podcast from the Center for Inclusive Childcare. I'm Priscilla Weigel, the Executive Director, and I'm so grateful today to be joined with a very special guest, Leo Howard III from Greater Twin Cities United Way. He is the Program Manager for the 80 by 3 initiative. He's a husband, a recent father, an adjunct professor at the U of M, and also we get to partner with Leo on our 80 by 3 work at CICC, and we've had the great fortune of having a long partnership with you all over at Greater Twin Cities United Way. And today, Leo, we get to talk about something that I know is very important to you, yes, building partnerships with families. And so Absolutely. Welcome, Leo Howard III.
Thank you. And I share that sentiment. I'm so excited to be here with you all today, but then also for our partnership with CICC. I love it. I love the work that we're able to see in real time. And I know when I was in the direct service role, a lot of my wanting and being was, I just wish there was someone out there who was doing this work from a higher level, more than just, and I couldn't see it, but being with you in this space, I get to see that every time we connect. So the feeling is mutual. I love being in this space and I'm excited for today.
I am too. So we're going to talk about bridges, not barriers, and really reimagining how to support families. And I know that all of those listeners out there who are working in early childhood spaces, whether it's family childcare, center-based, family friend and neighbor care, they spend a lot of time connecting with families and working to build that relationship. And so when you think about it, Leo, what does that mean, building bridges and not barriers?
Absolutely. And I think I want to start by framing that rapport building, that relationship building is a hard skill. It's not a soft skill. A lot of times people get to a space where that's just the byproduct. They feel like it's just the byproduct, but it's really not. That sets the basis for everything. And so bridges, not barriers, really it's describing a strategic and collaborative approach to overcoming systemic harms and to rebuild that trust. We'll talk a little bit more about healthy distrust of systems a little bit later, but rebuilding that trust within social systems, particularly for historically marginalized communities. And it really emphasizes transforming systems to be more equitable and responsive rather than, just responding to individual issues.
Nice. That's super helpful as we frame what we're going to talk about today. And I also think that for our listening audience too, this is something that when you go into working with young children, the support that you're given in training and professional development is focused on the children, and sometimes not much at all is focusing on building those family relationships. So this is a really great opportunity to bolster some skills out there too. So I'm excited. And now you alluded to healthy distrust of systems. Tell me more about that and what that means.
Absolutely. And just kind of going back to the point, I really believe that our early child care, the field itself, is uniquely positioned to just have a say about this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. You know me, I get really excited talking about the work that's being done. Yeah. But when you break down healthy distrust, I'll go back a bit and kind of break down what bridges, not barriers even entails. First, you have to understand the barriers. This concept really is acknowledging that distrust, particularly among Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, it's a healthy distrust. It's a rational, protective response rooted in long histories of systemic harm. And so then the second part to that I would throw on there is building of the bridges, focusing on approaches that actually do that. And so when we look at distrust, I want to kind of flip it on its head. I think it's a bit different than what people may think of when you hear distrust, especially when I throw healthy distrust on there.
Right.
And so, again, I mentioned before, it's a protective mechanism that individuals and communities develop because systems were often designed or operated in ways, or both, that entrenched barriers, inflicted trauma, and perpetuated cycles of marginalization and disinvestment. And so when you talk about that, where does it start? And the history goes far, far back. But when you talk about healthy distrust of systems, historical context matters. It's really important. Because when we talk about a healthy distrust of systems, it's important to understand that it's not a baseless suspicion. People aren't just being paranoid or in a space where it's just like making these things up. This is a rational and protective response that individuals and communities developed due to past and ongoing experiences of systemic harm. It's not about uncaring individuals or bad attitudes or families that are just hard to work with. It's a profound, legitimate stance rooted in long, personal, familial, and community histories of systems designed to see them fail. And so
Yeah.
you see examples of this across major systems essential for survival, let alone flourishing.
Yeah.
And so communities of color have faced continuous hurdles, exploitation, and honestly, even outright destruction of thriving communities for simply existing. And so when you talk about healthy distrust of systems, these stories get passed down from generation to generation. And it's not a way of, again, paranoia, but it's here's what we've learned. Here's what we need to know to keep ourselves safe
Yeah.
in these different spaces.
Sure. And it's very similar to when we talk about working with young children who've experienced trauma in their lives as well. It's the patterns that have been built to protect. And that's so important to highlight as we begin our conversation too. And do you have any stories of like an example of something when we think about the community and reimagining this supportive relationship and these bridges?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so there are countless examples of times where the healthy distrust has been valid. You talk about the Tuskegee syphilis study. You talk about just the fact that Black women were forcibly sterilized under eugenics laws for a very long time. And you look at the educational system, the school to prison pipeline, therapeutic systems, spaces that were framed as safe spaces, but ultimately led to the removal of children due to some of that saviorism. And
Yeah.
so you have all these negative examples, and then it's like, how does this look? How all these things happening? But then there's also the positive side. There's, what can we do about it? What are organizations doing about it? How are people rebuilding that trust? Like, what do we do to get there? And the examples that I would use and the people that I would point to for us to really focus on, the early childhood field itself. We look to them for direction for the early childhood development organizations and those supporting them. They are already doing a lot of this work to rebuild that trust, and they are oftentimes the reason why our community is able to get connected to resources.
Yeah.
It's not a magic wand, but it's systems change. And so I think the first example, not even example, first thing that we should do is put some respect on the early childhood development, not just organizations. You mentioned it before, whether it's community, FFN, or one of your bigger institutions, or the organizations developing those tools. We have to put some respect on their name and make sure that we label them as just what they are, like the foundation. And so taking it a step back, I know you asked for specific examples, but I want to just drive home the point that these formative years, when our babies and our families are establishing their initial relationship with education and with care systems, often their first interaction is with these spaces, is with maybe the FFN, maybe it's a early childhood development center. But that means that they're uniquely positioned to either reinforce existing distrust or actively rebuild that trust, setting the stage for lifelong interactions with these institutions. So that in itself is an example that I would point to, or something that I would like to highlight, is that these early childhood organizations in the space itself really are setting the groundwork. And so moving forward, there's just, and I can get into this a little bit later, I don't want to do too much, but there's a ton of examples of how organizations have used things like they've shifted the conversation from problem identification and deficit discourse to more of an asset-based approach. They're focusing
Yeah.
on solutions and strengths rather than just the challenges and perceived weaknesses. Organizations are also going from, and I get to see this in real time. So again, I'm getting really excited because I'm thinking of real life examples, but organizations are going from serving the community to collaborating with it. So
Yes.
this is empowering the family, recognizing their strengths and building on those strengths, but then also giving them a voice, empowering them to actively participate in the decision making, giving them a voice and inviting them to the table, not just speaking for them. examples I would throw out there off the top of my head would be, we have one organization who developed a parent resource room, and it was completely led, done, everything was by the parents down to the
Nice.
parents. I got feedback that there's even a point in time where there was a question about it being a mustard yellow. And it was like, is that really what you all want? And it was like, yep, that's what we want. So that's what happened. What they said they needed, what they identified was a gap for them personally. This organization just filled that gap, just built it.
Yeah.
And then these organizations are also creating restorative solutions as opposed to the suspension and expulsion. Like there's a lot of the organizations that we're partnering with that are looking for not like a last ditch effort, but really looking at how can we address the issue? How can we support this family so that they don't have to leave? And I think that those are some of the things that are really standing out to me. I'll kind of slow down there and see if there's another question. I have some more examples, but I want to save them for a little bit.
Well, that's exciting. And actually, Leo, as we have partnered with, Greater Twin Cities for so long on this 80x3 initiative, we have seen that firsthand as well. And just the dedication to providing partnership, collaborative solutions. Mm-hmm. And I love the story about, picking the color of the room. It means something when individuals feel like they have, like their words matter, their thoughts matter, their time matters. And I think, as you noted, when we think of early childhood educators and the work that we all do in childcare, we're meeting a family at those very first stages of their child's life where they are navigating so much, and it can be overwhelming. And that's why these collaborative partnerships and, as you said, direction to really key resources can happen. And when you start your educational pathway in a partnership like that, the long-term effects are going to be so amazing for that family and that child. Yeah.
100%. And you point to, and this is the perfect segue, you're pointing to just the importance, and we mentioned it earlier, building that trust through clear communication, empathy, transparency, and accountability, and just being there. Like these organizations, these spaces are developing real rapport and relationships. Like it's beyond surface level relationships. So when a family is going through a hardship, the first people that they turn to are often these organizations. And in turn, these organizations have turned into a hub of support, a hub of just resources. But the point that I really want to drive home is that there sometimes can be a disconnect of wanting to accept that support or trusting that support due to a healthy trust of systems. These organizations often play the role of the bridge. So I will accept this support from you because someone I care about, love, and trust with my whole being says that it's good for me. And this makes me think of our work with Creative Caponia. We kind of sat back and we were thinking about, who's supporting the supporters, who's helping the helpers. We have these directors, these educators who are completing this heavy lift, often without getting that support for themselves growing up. Who's helping them? So we tried to bring the Creative Caponia approach to where we were providing them with therapeutic support. But it got to a point where there was already so much rupture and harm done in those spaces that everyone was like really resistant to those traditional types of talk therapy. And through relationship building, like we couldn't even use the word therapy. We couldn't use therapeutic supports. We couldn't use anything that sounded like that. We had to use words like just support or just, help or something like that to really make sure that we weren't scaring anyone off because there had already been that rupture. Fast forward to the end of our last cohort year, we had organizations going up in the community. We were at our year-end celebration, and I heard community members pointing to Sarah from Creative Caponia saying, "That's my therapist. She helped me with X, Y, and Z, and you need to go talk to her because she'll help with this." And that doesn't happen without that organization having that relationship, having that trust built. So it's the other part that I want us to take from these early childhood organizations in the space itself, the field itself, is relationships are everything. Rapport is everything. You cannot have true systems change if you don't actually have a relationship with the people you're trying to create that change for.
And I think, and you said it very early on in our conversation, it's not an automatic occurrence. It takes time. It's that soft skill. It's that ability to connect with another human being in a respectful, kind, loving. I mean, you also just shared too. When you think about someone leaving their child, their most precious thing, with another human being, there has to be a deep trust there.
Yes.
And when that rupture happens, that's a huge, awful thing. And we don't want we don't want the trust to be ruptured. So when you think about also, you mentioned something, the difference between serving and partnering. And talk a little bit more about that and just ways that you see that as part of that bridge building.
Absolutely. You often hear the term, well, I want to make sure that their voice is heard at the table. I want to make sure that their voices. This brings them to the table and make sure that the conversations that are happening include them. They're able to be a part of that. Getting from a place from serving to really collab and co-creation. I love the word co-creation because that's what it is. You're creating your opportunity for thriving and wellness with the family. You're making sure that they are a part of it, and they're the experts on themselves, on their family. Like, they know what works and what doesn't. And that is, I think, the biggest part of it is being able to be in a space where you are co-creating, where you're collaborating, and where, like I said, voices aren't just brought to the table, but the people themselves are brought to the table. These organizations that we partner with, they do, like, they talk it, they say it, they do it better than they can say it. And so they champion family partners. They champion peer professionals with lived experience. And they really put them at the forefront of what they're doing. And this personal experience really allows them to connect as peers and, like, really reduce isolation and offer authentic guidance through these complex systems. So it's in a space where their lived experience and expertise is treated as such. And that's a big part of it too. It's not just saying we know what's best for you and your child, or we know what's best for you and your family. It's what is best? What have you seen that's worked? How can we work together to support you in the way that you need it? And the funny example that I have is one of my mom's birthdays. I just asked her, hey, what do you want to do? And she used to love Bar La Grassa. That was a spot. We haven't been in a minute, but let's go to that place with the square bread, the focaccia. And I was like, oh, the focaccia? Yeah, that's it. And so it's like, all right, you get closer to the birthday, and then it's like, well, we could also go to Olive Garden. Now, there's nothing wrong with Olive Garden, but I think the field itself, and often people who have been marginalized, create this sense and get this sense that I don't deserve the best of the best because maybe I can't afford it. I don't maybe deserve Bar La Grassa because I'm not paying for it. So maybe let me stick to Olive Garden. Let me stick to, again, nothing wrong with Olive Garden. But if you can have this, why not have Bar La Grassa? And so that's another point that I think that I want to drive home, is that the field itself is so selfless. It's so they care about everyone else. They want to see everyone else do well. And sometimes they are not, due to capacity, due to whatever, or due to them trying to help other people, they get to a space where they're giving it all away. And so we want to get to a space as United Way, as Greater Twin Cities United Way, as 80 by 3, that we're able to come and wrap our arms around them and say, hey, we see you too. This, and that's our role in the co-creation, is making sure that the helpers are being helped. I mentioned that before, and making sure that they have support, and making sure that we're doing it in a way that they need it, that they feel is for them.
Yeah. And so, Leo, I'm going to just say that there's probably listeners out there saying, okay, well, I want to do all these things, but I'm having a hard time getting the people to the table. Maybe there is that healthy distrust, that rupture that happened with another organization in the past. And so a new setting is going to be seen in the same light, when really they want a fresh start. They want to really be that connected support. What are some suggestions in building those opportunities and opening the door up and hoping that people will come in?
I think the first thing that I've seen really work well is naming that you're a part of the system, naming that you are a part of that. It doesn't do anyone any good to pretend like we're not. Like there's a bunch of these systems, and I have seen time and time again where, and I keep going back to the organizations we partner with because I want to highlight what they're doing. I've seen them really get to a point where they can say things like, we are a part of this system and here's what we're doing to address it. Like, and I think taking a step back is naming that we're all a part of this and it may not be where we want it to be. And being real about the fact that, like I said before, there's no magic wand, there's no cookie cutter perfect way to do it. And we are improving and making the changes, because when it comes to healthy distrust of systems, the reason why it's healthy is because there are reasons to actually distrust it. There are valid reasons to be wary of it. There are valid reasons to be afraid of it. And so what I've seen these organizations do is say, we're a part of this system, and here's what we're doing to address these gaps. Here's what we're doing to address the fear. And the other big thing that I would say is that I keep going back to it, but they've developed this relationship and this rapport. They've really created a space where there's trust, where there's love, where people know that they're cared about. And that's the basis of it. And like you said, this isn't a thing that you can just do one day and say, oh, we got rid of the healthy distrust, but it's every single day. It's making sure that your policies and practices are echoing that want. If you say that that's what you want to do, then it's echoing that. I've talked to organizations that directors have known about a staff member going through some things personally at home and dealing with a lot. And there started to be rumblings. They kept coming in about 5-10 minutes late every day. And people were like, well, I want my break. I want my break. I want my break. Instead of this the director knew that the staff member was just awesome and they just really were going through a hard time. Instead of firing that person, instead of coming down on them, they sat them down and said, what's going on? Like, how can I help? Came out that there was some stuff going on at home, and the schedule, talk about the policies and practices. She now was able to change, and this isn't going to be possible for everyone, but she was able to change that staff member's schedule around to where she started 30 minutes later. And so what in turn was a problem eventually got to a point where they were able to praise it because she was able to come in earlier. And so it's really looking at who's around you, how are you taking care of the people around you, and like that's your starting point. Taking care of the families, taking care of the staff, making sure that there's a foundation set based on safety, based on trust. And that's what these organizations are doing, and that's what works. That's how it works when it comes to like getting this community the resources and help. You have to have that trust. And so I would say that's the first thing that you do. The biggest lift is creating that culture, creating that community. And we're partnering with Embracing Equity, and we're doing different work in the community to make sure that, equity is not just a part of the plate, that it is the whole plate. They say that, and we love that. And so I think that looking internally, doing sort of like an audit of yourself on what do our policies look like? What do our processes look like? How are people describing their experience with us? That's the first step. And I know that's like really heady and big, but you can't get to the other steps without starting there. And then once you get there, it's getting the feedback. It's making sure that people have a voice and people are at the table, and you're continuing to check in. It's a living, breathing thing. It never is done. Equity doesn't just end, relationships and rapport doesn't just end. It's continuing to build on that and continuing to show up when needed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love the fact that it truly is ongoing, which can be feeling very daunting sometimes on those days when you're overwhelmed and you've been giving it all away as that organization, as that provider. But when we think of even, your audit being that self-reflective person individually and as an organization and as a full team is really important. And when we think about wrapping up our conversation and a call to action. I mean, you've done so much of that already in this conversation, Leo, of giving us great ideas, great suggestions, and great just ways of thinking and being that are going to create these bridges. But, what are some things that you can give our listeners as we wrap up this really important conversation as far as calls to action and specifics?
Absolutely. And I'll just real quick touch on the fact that like the 80x3 work we do doesn't just happen in a vacuum. And this is an important piece of like what the call to action, because this work is a foundational piece of the Greater Twin Cities United Way's our wider commitment to drive broader systems change. We want to impact the system in a way where we are encouraging others to invest in it and actually, like I said before, make the system better, remove what barriers we can, and working to address those reasons for distrust in the first place. And so my call to action first would be making sure that you're centered in some of that, and and like just learning who's doing what out there, figuring out who's doing what work and how other places are driving systems change. We've partnered with the state of Minnesota to really dramatically improve the billing situation for childcare providers using the early learning scholarship system.
Yes.
And like things like this, where 16,000 kids are getting these scholarships, while that's amazing, behind the scenes, it's a logistical nightmare. Things are fragmented, split across different regional administrators. And then Greater Twin Cities comes in and serves as the one central payment administrator for the entire state of Minnesota. So not just shuffling papers, but centralizing a broken process in a system. And looking at like things like that are going on. We're partnering with DCYF to pilot a program supporting parents who work in the early childhood field with stipends and things like that. And so I guess for me, it would be knowing what's out there, knowing who's already doing the work, because I think that does two things. I think it puts you in a space where you don't feel alone, where you're not like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this work by myself. No one is doing it. And then also it gives you space to say, okay, here's how I can lock in. Here's how I can tap in. Here's how I can help. And then the final point that I'll make is, successful system change involves partnering with trusted local community leaders. And then that's guided by the community themselves. You got to remember balance and nuance. It's important to acknowledge the systemic shortcomings and the harm, while also uplifting the strengths and assets of people who are doing this work, the child care professionals and families who are working to repair not only the system, but the trust itself. And then just making sure that there's a vision, like always making sure that the goal is ultimately to work towards a system that is sufficiently trustworthy, where communities feel confident and good about the support and resources they receive, and just get a clear reason to invest and benefit from its offering. So I think if there's one thing I want people to take away from this, I'm going to say a couple things. There's a few things that I want them to take away. It's put some respect on our early childhood, just the field itself and the expertise and the knowledge and greatness that they bring. And then two, we have to stop looking at relationships and rapport building as soft skills. Like those are things that everyone needs, and it's the basis of everything. You can't have trust-based philanthropy. You can't have any of this without trust. Like it's literally in the word. And so making sure that you are aware of those things, but that's also leading your work, making sure that that has a place in whatever direction you're going. It continues to be sort of that guiding compass.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think we're living it out in our relationship with CICC and 80x3 and working with you, because I think when it's working, you feel it.
Yes.
Viscerally, you feel it all the way through your whole being of we're making connections, we're caring, and you've said the word love and support many times through our conversation, and that's what it's all about. Because as we've talked about, we're partnering with families, collaborating together with the most precious thing that they have, their child, at the center of that. And all of these things are so important. Leo, thank you for spending time today talking with us about this. And we're going to include some links as well to the 80x3 website, and also some of the stories that you have there on that. And then, of course, at CICC, we have an 80 by 3 tab as well from
Yes.
our partnership and all of the great resources and tools housed there. And we just are grateful for the partnership, grateful for the time today, Leo. Thank you very much for joining me on Inclusion Matters.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. For more resources, visit us at inclusivechildcare.org.